In this video, we're going to look at activity 3.1.5, variables and functions, and we're looking at part 2. We're going to use a variable to remember a maximum or minimum value, and then we're also going to go ahead and take a look at part 2a in this video to write a program to see what the closest value the distance sensor would read. So in this, we're going to build this sample program that they have given us, and then as we go forward, they want us to do A, where we're going to modify so that our variable closest remembers our closest distance that distance sensor will read. So I'm going to go ahead and move into Vex Code, and I'm going to go ahead and start building our program. We're going to start off with a comment block, and we'll call this part 2 provided code. We're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new variable. So we're going to make a new variable, and we're going to call it the biggest. So we want to know what's the biggest number that we can get there. So let's go ahead and we're going to choose set the biggest value to 0. That'll be our initial one. Then they want us to, in the looks section, they want us to print, and we're going to set the cursor to row. So we'll put our variable in here in a second, but we're going to go to row 1, column 5 on the brain. They want us to grab another print section, and then they want us to set to the next cursor, to the next row on the brain as well. We're going to move down into the control, and we're going to grab a forever loop. So this may get a little bit lengthy here. And they want us to say that while that the bumper is not pressed, so we'll have to go into the operators, grab the not, go into the bumper switch condition, then they want us to go up to looks, and they want us to clear row 2 on the brain, set the cursor to then row 2, column 1. They want us to print our variable on there, set our cursor to the next, so row 2, column 5. We're going to print another sensor value, and then if, so we'll go back down into control, grab an if then block, and grab an operator. So if it's larger than, and the biggest, and they want us to grab our potentiometer value here, then we're going to go ahead and set. So now we're down to, put that into the if condition, set our biggest to be equal to the value. I'll just duplicate the potentiometer to be there. And then what they want us to do is also, let's go ahead and put in the last print statement. We'll put in the potentiometer. So they want us to change the angle to degrees for all of this, so that way we can see the actual degree angle that's going on. And then we're going to go ahead and say the biggest is going to go into the variable here. They want us to print the biggest on the brain. Then up at the top, same kind of thing. They want us to print it up top, and they want us to print what's the potentiometer reading up here as well. And all set in degrees. This should go through and build our program. So as what we see on the screen. Okay, so let's go ahead and download, and let's run. So what you're going to see is, now I need to probably set, so let me stop here. I'm going to grab anytime before the print, I'm going to go ahead and set the font to super large, and let's see what we have here before any of our print statements. I'm going to go ahead and throw those in there. So let's download now. Okay, so that looks a lot better. So right now, here's what we're kind of getting is there is our biggest value. So there is what we're seeing is here is, you know, here's what the biggest value the variable is. This is what the potentiometer is reading. So we can see as I'm turning the knob, the numbers go up, and then it comes back down. So if I press the bumper switch, so it says while the bumper switch is not pressed, you can see that, you know, that's going to go through and, you know, do all those different things. So this remembers the largest value. So if I stop the program and download again and hit run, you're going to see here it's set at 1. So if I go up just a little bit, there, if I go back down, 17 was the biggest value that was being read by the potentiometer. So this is what the variable is getting, and this is what the sensor is reading in real time. So if I go up to 23 and go back down, you'll see that the biggest number it remembered was 26. And as I go up and kind of back down, you'll see it keeps that in mind of kind of what's going on there. So 250 is going to be the highest value, and if I go back down, and in order to go through and see that, I would have to go through and you know, be able to do that. So, you know, we can go through and always, you know, kind of stop and restart. And if I hit the run button, so here's the thing, if I press the bumper switch and hold that down, I'm not getting any values. So now once I take my finger off the bumper switch, but if I hold it down, it doesn't record any of the values. So that allows me to get it back down to 0. And then once I take my finger off, then I'm able to start recording values again. So let's say I want to remember, it's like, all right, I turned it that far to 35. If I press the bumper switch, it doesn't allow anything to happen. So that's where the while is not being met, and that's where it's skipping all of the code that's inside of there. So it's kind of like a lock button that we can have. And then once I go through and take it off, I can start remembering some values, get up to 125, lock it in, and there's where the values are staying there. It does not allow me to read that potentiometer anymore. So that's the effect that the bumper switch has within this program. All right, we'll go ahead and stop the program. So this is just kind of what happens with utilizing a variable. As we look at 2A, they want us to modify the program so that the variable closest is going to remember the closest distance that the distance sensor detects. The limit switch should reset the record, start with an object high above the sensor slowly and move toward and away from the sensor. Make sure the space above the sensor is clear before running the program. So our distance sensor, we need to make sure that it's clear, which it is, and we can go through and start to go into Vex Code and modify this program. So easiest thing to do is I'm going to go down into variables, and I'm going to make a variable, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to name this to be the closest. And here I can actually set the variable closest is to 0. Now here's the only thing about the distance sensor. I'm going to go into devices, and I'm going to go ahead and choose the distance sensor. Now right now, if I go ahead and I change this, maybe I need to go ahead and change this over to inches. My ceiling in where I'm working right now is about 63 inches. And so a little over 63 inches. So right now that would be, I need to go through and think about this. If I set the closest, the initial value to 0, I'm not going to get any reading other than 0 on this. So I probably need to think about, and as I get closer, as I put my hand over it and get closer, the numbers should go down, just like how it is as the sensor is reading. So if I don't go through and change this and set this to a value that makes sense, I'm not going to get a good number that comes out of it. So I'm going to keep in mind that 63 inches. So in this case, I'm going to set the closest. I'm going to go ahead and set this to 60. So I've noticed if I set it to 63, it doesn't quite work so well. So you want to kind of go just a little bit lower. So we're going to set the closest value to 60. We're going to go ahead, I'm going to take out this variable. We're going to go ahead and bring in the closest. Let's print the closest on the brain. And then what we're going to say here is, rather than the potentiometer, we're going to use the distance sensor and print what that distance is in inches on the next row, and then set the cursor to the next row. So this looks pretty similar. They want us to go through and use the limit switch. So let's grab the limit switch. And they want us, again, we're going to be printing the closest variable on the brain. And the thing that we're looking for is going to deal with the distance that we're finding in inches. So, and double checking that we have that. Okay, so if, for example, the distance sensor is in inches and now my operator, actually I need to switch out an operator. If it's less than, and I can get rid of, I can grab my distance and throw it in there, get rid of this operator, and grab my closest. So my closest starts out at 60. If the distance sensor reads anything less than 60, then we're going to set the closest to be equal to whatever that distance is in inches. So I'm just going to duplicate that and drop that in. So we'll see what effect this is going to have. So I'm going to hit download, and I'm going to hit run. So there right now, there's some of the readings that I'm getting. You can see this one is reading the actual sensor value. This one is reading what's the closest value. So 60 is the starting, and that's the one that we've got there. So now if I take my hand and I put it over the top of the distance sensor, you can see I'm reading 12, and as I get closer, you can see my hand coming into the frame now. Now I get down to 4, 3, 2, 1. 0 as soon as I get down there. So the closest value that I had was 0, and then I can go through and see that this is what's the sensor is reading in real time there on the screen. So if I cover it, this is also a way that I can go through and keep track of that. So now if I go through and press the limit switch, you'll notice that this locked in, so I can't go through and get a reading off of that. So I would need to go through and stop. Let me rerun the program. There's 60. If I press the limit switch and try to do anything, it locks or keeps the program from running. So then now I can get a value, and if I go through and get my hand over the top, there, as I was reading at 14, you can probably see the shadow of my hand on the screen there in the bottom right hand corner. So 14 is the closest value that the distance sensor was able to read with the program that we just wrote. Alright, so this will finish out activity 3.1.5, variables and functions, part 2A. Take a look at the next video for part 2B, where we're going to modify the program to see what's the brightest value that the optical sensor detects.